Okay, just run down the panel. Do you agree with all the analysts you've been listening to over the last week about how bad the market is, or do you agree with Nerida? Anthony?
Nerida.
Strongly with Nerida.
Nerida, definitely.
Same.
Good. You've good company, Nerida.
Yeah.
So I've actually read all your reports. I've read the annual report. I read, Peter, your annual report. You're very confident about 2017. What is it that keeps you awake at night? What's your worry about 2017 and 2018?
Okay, to put it in context, though, let's not go too quickly past your first comment about our confidence. What we're seeing in Resi is, I think, very, very normal. Remembering we're not in high-rise apartments, so I've just got to qualify that. So I'm talking from experience outside of that. But we're very confident in what we're seeing because it's something we've been seeing coming for a number of years. If I go back and look at old board reports, pretty well what's happening now is what we said would be happening at the time as it plays out. So against that background, I'll answer your question, what keeps us awake at night? It really comes down to anything that impacts on confidence. I'm not seeing anything in terms of fundamentals, and the report that we've seen, we support, and all those other numbers. It really is what can impact on confidence. That can be jobs. We're not seeing too much in that space. I think it's more around just this, what you're reading in the media, and just this feeling we get sometimes with the Trump factor and all those sorts of things. It's just, will that have any impact on confidence? I don't think so, but that's probably the area. And I suppose it's also likely to keep you awake at night because it's the thing you don't think you can control as much. Most of the other things are in your control. You tend to worry more about things that you can't control.
Yeah. And Raina?
Probably say approvals. I guess in this day and age, you just don't know how long approval's going to take. It could be in time, out of time, called in, all sorts of things happening. And I think, we've heard a lot today about cities and densifying our cities. Yep, totally get that, totally should happen. Definitely think it will happen, but where we hold ourselves up is how much our community will accept that happening and the time it will take them to accept.
Thanks.
And I think it's the performance of government. We've got a big challenge to house this growing population, and we need government, stable government, good sound decision making for us to be able to cope with that. You look at the duration of this property cycle in Sydney and Melbourne, and it's getting up towards 4 years now, which is long historically, but the fundamentals are there to support it. Good population growth, low interest rates, good jobs growth now. So we're pretty positive about the outlook, but we need government to be able to deal with this growing population.
And Anthony?
I'm with Peter. It's confidence for me. I think the Australian media, for whatever reason, it looks at residential property as either going up or going down. There's no sense that it may actually track sideways, which I think is our view. There's nothing fundamentally that should change. I agree with Andrew. There's not that the real property fundamentals are not a risk at all. But I think as soon as people read enough negative reports about why the property market might slow down, that'll convince enough people to sit on the sidelines.
Yeah. And what would impact? So just quickly, because we get the sense that in some places it's still going up pretty strongly. Are you selling anything? You raising prices anywhere?
Yeah. Sydney I think has gone up by about 60% in 4 years.
And you're still raising prices?
Yep.
And Andrew,
but I should just clarify that by saying it's hard to actually just put a blanket over a city and say we're raising prices, but definitely in some projects we are.
So where are you raising prices in Sydney?
Well located. Transport,
yeah.
To be honest, anywhere around a train station, that's where we're raising prices.
Yeah. Andrew?
Everywhere outside of Townsville and Perth.
Definitely have seen price growth over the last 18 months.
Yeah. When you sit down, are you going to raise prices again?
I think there's room to grow, yeah.
And Peter?
Yeah, again, it's really hard to generalise. So Adelaide's very flat for us. So you got project by project, stage by stage. Are they a mature project? Are they a new starting project? We're a volume builder, a volume developer, and when we're doing that stuff, we're chasing that first over price growth. So yes, there is price growth, but it's not driving our results or our business. That's volume.
So none of you touched on. I mean, I listed a couple of things, sort of things that journalists ask about on what would be worrying the sector. And I started with lending. I mean, is anybody seeing any problems with the lending, the way APRA's changed the macroprudential rules lately? Anthony?
For offshore purchases, yes. It's definitely slower for these people to get approvals. Local investors and local owner-occupiers, no problems at all, plenty of finance out there. There is actually still a lot of finance out there for offshore investors as well, it's just harder. They need to be proving local income and making sure they go through a lot of more difficult hurdles than what they would have otherwise had to go through probably 18 months ago.
Because you're dealing with, you do have some offshore purchases for some of your projects.
Yep.
And are there, so what do you do if they're not getting their finance?
We're doing a combination of things. Again, it probably becomes a very localised process. For instance, in Sydney, people bought apartments that have just recently settled. They might have bought them 2 years ago. Some of these people have made 20, 30% in capital gains at the time, and they pay a 10% deposit in cash. So it's a lot to walk away from. Our rescission rates are still very low. They're pretty much in line with historical rates. So we'll naturally, it's about understanding your purchases. We'll nurse people through and help them, but some people won't be able to settle in the end.
And what about just domestic investors? Because we heard a lot about domestic investors. Any problem with finance for domestic investors? Peter, you?
No, it's not on our radar at all. We've been quite stable in that. Our settlement rates have been up there. We don't run a pre-sale model though. We're a horizontal developer, so we have very few pre-sales. The pre-sales we have with other builders through land sales, so they tend to be a different kettle of fish. But no, it's not something that's impacting our business.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the thoughts, I think, is about the upcoming sort of settlements that are going to happen in the Brisbane apartment market. So I think, from my point of view, the jury's out about how those will track. There's a lot of nervousness that they will actually get finance and settle. It would be expected that I think valuers will be struggling to make the right valuations to ensure settlement, but jury's out. Let's see early next year.
Where you are seeing a change is development finance for a lot of the private developers is getting a lot more difficult to secure. That is going to naturally reduce commencements and naturally reduce supply running through the market. So getting development finance for a local property developer from the big four Aussie banks is pretty difficult right at the moment.
Yeah, and is that, so yeah, no, that's a problem. I mean, has it stopped altogether? There's a sense that has stopped the buying of sites. Have you got is there any sense that the purchase of sites has stopped?
Oh, you're more seeing the commencements. So even with good pre-sales, a good tier one contractor locked in, approvals in place, difficult to get the finance to commence.
Yeah.
But for we're still seeing good demand for development sites, but generally they're secured with either equity or other sources.
Yeah. Well, I presume that none of the panel are having any trouble getting finance. I mean, has anybody found that the banks are really difficult for them? No.
Not on our side. I mean, it's a lot of our financing comes off our balance sheet.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that's the thing too. The competition for sites is still out there, even from offshore. And I think that's the reason they have the capital to fund them themselves. They don't rely on the banks necessarily, but the people that do are having trouble.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So that was that. And Raina, you touched on it before. I mean, the other thing I'd written down here is oversupply. That seems to be the thing that all the analysts are focused on. And in Brisbane seems to be one of the classics. I mean, by one analysis, Brisbane's got a 30% increase in the number of, in Brisbane, has got a 30% increase in the number of apartments, which is why you'd be worried about what's going to settle there.
I guess luckily we're not in that market, so not really losing too much hair over that. But I think when you look at narrative slides and you see about the demand profile of people still out there, still looking for product, that apartments are in the mix of that product, and still Queensland is a largely house and land market. Even though there is a lot of stock going up, I think we will have to wait till see next year as to how that pans out with settlements.
There is a good chart going around. You can put a slide up here that would scare everyone when you look at commencements. But when you normalise that against population growth and you take it to per 1,000 people, you'll see that the starts last year are only for the first time reflecting that increase in population growth after a decade of undersupply. Yeah, there is going to be pockets of oversupply, but when you look at it as an overall number, we're only just building enough to keep up with population growth at the moment.
Another way to look at it, Rob, and these things always amaze us, but if you do, and the common theme for the day has been around a bigger population, and if the future forecasts are right, we'll be at 40 million by, say, 2055. If you extrapolate that over the years, that's about 1.3% per annum growth in population. We're doing that. And if you translate that back, depending on housing composition, that's going to be somewhere between 200 and 225,000 new dwellings nationally per annum. We did that for a year and everyone's panicking about oversupply.